What are the 5 absolute worst decisions you can make in Cyberpunk 2077? This massive open-world role-playing game is pretty good when it comes to giving players multiple options. 5 different attributes, 84 guns, and 40 melee weapons provide an almost limitless number of builds you can create, and story choices regularly allow for quests to have multiple outcomes, although these are often quite minor, with many having little to no reverberating consequences throughout the rest of the game. It leans more into action-adventure than a role-playing game in that regard, but once in a blue moon, a choice will come along, sometimes very obvious, sometimes extremely obscure, which can actually have massively reverberating and far-reaching consequences on the rest of your playthrough. That's kind of the angle I'm taking today when looking at the 5 worst decisions that you as a player could possibly make. Events which, if handled wrong, can lock you out of a ton of potential content and/or story. As always, massive thank you to the supporters over on Patreon for going the extra mile to keep the channel alive. More on that at the end, but for now, let's get to it. At number 5, not saving Takemura during the parade where we kidnap Hanako. One of the grandest quests in the game involves infiltrating Arasaka security during a float parade in Japantown. At its culmination, Takemura will kidnap Hanako Arasaka so that we can explain ourselves to her whilst hidden away in a building. But we get discovered by an Arasaka assault squad who literally sends us cascading to the bottom of the building by blowing it up. When we come to, Johnny says this.
Last chance to get the fuck out of here!
Takemura. Can't leave him back there.
Forget him, guy's toast. Unless you want to wind up like him.
And to those unaware, myself included on my first run, it's fair to assume at this point that Takemura was killed in the blast, with our only option being to now delta the hell out of there. Don't worry, that's not the only option, and if we run through this little hole here and start making our way back up the stairs, pretty soon we'll get an added objective to try and save Takemura. He'll be holed up behind this counter and we'll now be able to fight our way out together. Escaping, we'll go our separate ways again for a while, but not long after we can give him a call. Now, this call may be the main thing to miss out on for a lot of players, but for those who chose the devil ending, or just want to play all the endings at least once, because that's perfectly doable in one playthrough, having Takemura die here makes the entire devil ending feel a lot more hollow in my opinion. Takemura has a huge part to play through most of this, showing up again mere minutes after we make the decision on the rooftop. He'll be there not only to aid us in storming the Arasaka residence, but also later Arasaka Tower. The fight with Adam Smasher especially is a lot easier with Takemura by our side, especially for glass cannon builds which go down in 1 or 2 hits, as he can be our bullet sponge. I can testify, a glass cannon build without him is not the easiest thing in the world. Playing through the ending twice without Takemura, there's definitely moments where it's straight up clear that the dialogue was written with the intention of him being there as well.
Does anyone else have trembling hands?
So Hellman's already taken the champagne, and I'm the only other one here, so this wording feels a little bit strange without Takemura beside us. I don't know, it's not really an issue, it's just something I found interesting. Come the epilogue of this particular ending, that is also in my opinion a hell of a lot better with Takemura present. To start with, we get a much more extensive range of dialogue options to pursue before deciding whether to sell our soul, and Takemura feels like much more of a friend to talk to than the likes of Anders Hellman. Sure, he's not exactly a scratch on many of the other side characters we befriend in the game, and it's clear his loyalties ultimately lie with the corporation, but we do have some banterous back and forths throughout our time together, and I feel like we and Takemura do ultimately form a lot of respect for one another. Interesting thing I noted though, whether it's Takemura or Hellman at the end, this contract still reads that we're signing our engram into Hellman's possession, and it does create 2 wildly different dynamics of either signing a contract presented by a friend of sorts, or signing one from the guy who essentially intends to claim ownership of us. Though whichever, it's still presented as one of the worst decisions in the game that you can make, even though it's technically one of the only ways to kind of survive. On the whole though, I'd say knowingly letting Takemura die is a terrible idea. He's an honourable man, and the devil ending feels very empty and lonely without him. He's our main contact throughout the Arasaka questline, and in my eyes, it's like playing the Star ending without Panam, Don't Fear the Reaper without Johnny, or the Sun ending without Rogue. We just miss a ton of stuff. Now, River Ward may be the least interesting love interest as voted for by you, but he's still a decent cop with a good heart. That's why when his nephew Randy is kidnapped by one of the most despicable human beings in the game, I think the majority of us would have jumped to River's aid. But there are in fact multiple options to make some very bad choices during the On the Hunt quest. Some are uncharacteristically downright evil, others fairly innocent, but also not very good. First up, after we explore Randy's trailer and then head in for dinner, River questions whether we'll stay on to help him with the rest of the case. Now, I always took this to be more of an affirmation than a choice, but actually, if we so choose here, for absolutely no reason at all, we can just decide to walk away now. We'll have to pick the option twice to confirm we can't help, after which V, giving no definitive explanation as to why, will simply get up and leave.
I'll see you around.
River will send us an angry and disappointed text and sever ties with us. It's a very bad decision that brings a pointless and premature end to River's questline, but it can get way worse. If we stay on, as any good human would, the next bad decision opportunity comes when scanning Anthony Harris's comatose dreams. Admittedly, I found this option harder to attain than just playing the brain dance right, but if you scan these in the wrong order, I suppose, you scan the Night City skyline out here before anything else, and possibly the sound cue for the landfill, and then immediately quit out of the editor without scanning anything else, we won't then know for certain to head to Edgewood Farm, with Poppy Farm nearer to the dam also coming up in a 50-50 chance option. Again, I struggled to get this, and 3 times out of 4, I just wound up going to Edgewood Farm automatically. Anyway, if you do somehow wind up with this and go to Poppy Farm, it turns out we really did get to Randy in the nick of time by playing normally, as the 20 minutes or so spent at the wrong farm first means we're too late to save River's nephew. River blames himself for trusting us, and I guess that's fair enough. A real investigator would likely have been a lot more thorough on the brain dance. River then goes to kill comatose Anthony Harris for himself, and despite offering to help, I'd imagine River's had quite enough of us screwing things up for him by that point.
Hang on. You trying to blame me for the fuck up?
It was my mistake. Thought you could help me. That we'd fare better together.
You're grieving, so I'll forget you said that.
Yeah, forget it. Forget everything.
Hell, in this timeline, perhaps leaving him to do things for himself would have been for the best. You know what's not for the best though? Leaving him to try and traverse Edgewood Farm alone after we travel there with him. That's right, we literally have the stupid option to just walk away here. If we do, River will send a text saying he really needs us and where the hell have we gone, followed shortly by another declaring that he can't wait any longer and is going in. The idiot gets shot immediately by the defenses, or at least I assume this doesn't look like he got blown up, and if we return, he's tragically lying dead on the floor. Randy obviously dies too in this scenario, and the roof entrance is even magically covered now, so we can't rescue him alone. A pretty rash and foolish move on River's part here, but can we really blame him? He's probably very confused at our disappearance and also extremely panicked. And V can't even explain to Johnny why we left.
Poor bastard. You just left him.
Yeah, I did.
It borders on the realms of hilarious how ridiculous this whole situation is, if it wasn't so horrendously tragic, obviously. Joss will text us shortly after, blaming V for the death of her son and brother, which, I mean, yes, this is 100% our fault, and one of the biggest opportunities in the game to be an unapologetically downright evil son of a bitch. This one is the darkest timeline for this quest, and whilst it doesn't have as many reverberating consequences as the rest of the list, it still undoubtedly qualifies as one of the worst decisions in the game. Sure, it's not an easy mistake to make per se, deliberate malice is absolutely involved here, but it's sometimes fun to see just how far the game will let us go in being a truly terrible human. Turns out, in some cases, pretty far. Johnny Silverhand may kick off our schizophrenic relationship by behaving like an absolute dick, but given time and a little bit of effort, he becomes a genuine travel companion and friend, soon electing to make the selfless decision of helping to save V, even if it means destroying himself in the process. Various dialogue options and choices throughout the game will affect our relationship level with Johnny, which is denoted by this middle icon in the home menu. Now, we want to get this to 70%, as it will allow us to unlock what is arguably the best game ending. And I say best in the sense that nobody else dies, we don't surrender to our enemies, and we also get to just solo storm Arasaka Tower like the baddest of badasses. It's absolutely worth doing at least once, and like I say, all endings are potentially accessible from the same playthrough, seeing as we revert back to the point of no return after completing each one. But it's more than possible to badly lock ourselves out of this secret Don't Fear the Reaper ending, with the only way to fix it being to backtrack all the way to whenever it was you played the Chip-In Inquest. Indeed, it all comes down to a few interactions at the oil fields which can determine whether or not this ending becomes permanently accessible. One of the worst decisions in this case is to pick any of the wrong options here, because again, it locks us out of a huge chunk of content later. So let's try not to do that. The goal here is to first kind of manipulate Johnny into feeling guilty for some of his behavior towards us, but also make him aware that redemption isn't unattainable. The first key option here is when Johnny's telling us how precious our friendship is, and we want to kind of burst his bubble a bit by saying this.
No, Johnny, you fucked that up too. You used me. Lied to me. I can't trust you at all.
Is it too late to ask for a second chance?
And in this rare instance, he actually takes it on the chin and humbles himself. It's crucial now that we ask what he wants from us.
Most people I thought were my friends. They couldn't even stand to be in the same room with me. You're fucking closest to me by a long shot. There, 24/7. And yet, you don't seem to hate my living guts. At least so it seemed. Till now.
And finally, we want to allow him the shot at redemption that he's after by saying this.
Okay. But as second chances go, this is your last. I refuse to be that naive.
I'll try damned hard.
And that's it, 3 of the most important dialogue choices in the game all strung together into one conversation. Provided you say this, Don't Fear the Reaper should be unlockable, and if you don't already know, the way to do this is very hidden. So, once on the rooftop and deciding what the hell to do during the ending, first pick the option for Johnny and Rogue to go. Then wait for 5 real-life minutes, maybe go and make yourself a cup of tea or a cocktail or something, and provided you picked those 3 options back at the oil fields or have an affinity at 70%, Johnny should chime in with this.
You, me, and Arasaka Tower. Kinda sounds like a Eurodyne lyric, I know, but trust me, we'll go fucking Nova.
And for the PC players amongst us who have neither the affinity or the right options and still want the ending, you can input this snippet of code if you have a console command mod to force the game to unlock it for you. Is that cheating? Yes, but do you really want to spend hours backpedaling and redoing stuff? At the end of the day, time is precious, and not everybody has the time for that. Ripperdocs are a core component when it comes to leveling up our characters and improving our skills. Selling a range of cyberware to suit every build, you'd only want to miss these guys if you were trying to play full Gannic for some reason. Annoyingly, one of the 14 Rippers in the game can actually become unavailable though, based on our choices during the main story. We'll visit Fingers during Automatic Love, only to learn that he soullessly sold out Judy's best friend, Evelyn Parker. Extracting her location from him is perfectly doable without bloodshed, but I mean, come on. This is a video game, and I'm sure many of you, just like me, are much more drawn to making dramatic and exotic choices when they come up. And punching this dude square on the nose is just all too tempting if you don't realize there's consequences. Yep, doing this means Fingers won't trade with us anymore and locks us out of some of the best cyberware in the game. It totally crushes the possibility of making the best Sandevistan build possible with the TNT Mark IV, performing the long distance triple jump with the epic fortified ankles, or becoming a cool based damage sponging tank with the Pain Editor or legendary Kata Resist. Considering the popularity of Sandevistan builds after Cyberpunk Edgerunners, that is objectively the most dire of these consequences, but it's also just not good all round. Now, it is possible to buy from Fingers and punch him too if you rack up 27 street cred and 100k before Automatic Love and buy all the unique items ahead of time, but seriously, can anybody actually be bothered to do that? I mean, I totally did on my last playthrough, but then I do have an unhealthy dedication of exploring every quantifiable detail of this game. To be honest though, it actually wasn't that bad. I just completed a ton of gigs and scanner hustles ahead of time. But for a first playthrough, I imagine you A, are probably dying to learn what's going to happen next, and B, likely aren't even aware that punching Fingers has consequences. It's unfortunate, but the guy really does have a monopoly on some top pieces of cyberware. But this last one, in my opinion, is by far the worst decision we can make, and I feel sorry for anyone who accidentally stumbled across this and inadvertently locked themselves out of the most popular romance option, half a questline, and an entire another ending. Sure, Don't Fear the Reaper is easily the most complicated ending to achieve, but the star ending with the Nomads was the one I got originally and will always hold a special place in my heart. However, rewinding back a bit to the quest with a little help from my friends where we acquired the parts for the Basilisk tank, it is entirely possible to completely and utterly screw up here. Mind you, if you're just doing the perfectly acceptable thing of following whatever Panam says because reasons, this probably won't become an issue for you. But to those more curious among us, it's very possible that you'll stumble across this option and unwittingly make the only girl who'd ever love your male V turn and despise you forevermore. It's no secret that for most of this questline, Saul is the antagonist to all Panam's daring schemes, preferring to take a slow and steady approach and outright refusing to allow anything with the potential to harm the clan in any way, even if it runs the possibility of being really good. He utterly objects to the plan to steal the Basilisk, and as far as he's then concerned, it's off the table. Little does he know that a rebellious band of Aldecaldos headed up by Panam are still plotting behind his back to go ahead and steal the Basilisk anyway. Panam assumes that you'll want to be part of the plan, but at this point, much like we did with River, we can refuse. Though worse still, just like the school kid who annoys everybody, we can go and snitch. Yes, the game doesn't tell you this, though no doubt the more explorational players amongst us might stumble upon it by accident, but heading to Saul in this trailer, it's possible to get locked into a conversation about Panam's plan. If this happens to you, then to avoid one of the worst decisions in the game, make sure you pick the option rather not interfere, or else you'll wind up ratting out Panam's plan, and shortly after getting this extremely angry call.
Fuck, V! How could you?
Hey, glad you called.
Do you seriously not know? Or did you pull some other shit thing besides ratting me out to Saul?
How'd Saul react?
He humiliated me in front of the clan. He made me look like an idiot! Cassidy, Mitch, Carol, we're all lepers. No one will talk to us. Are you pleased?
Did it for your own good, Panam.
Oh, bullshit, V. You know what? I can't believe how much of a hypocrite you are. And here I thought, fuck, to be so stupid.
Maybe I can...
No, you cannot. Not anything more. I never want to see you again.
To say my girl's mad at me would be a gross understatement. The Nomads will pack up and relocate, and you will lose the Queen of the Highway quest, the star ending option, the Aldecaldo camp at both locations, and all of those flirty texts with Panam should you choose to romance her. Though heading to the secondary Nomad camp, we can come across this funny sight. I guess CDPR assumed so few people would wind up like this that they didn't even think it worthwhile to clear up this coding mess. But as the saying goes, snitches get on coyotes. Yep, if you've seen my cars video, you'll know that the only silver lining to this option is that we get one of the best Badlands cars in a unique red color absolutely free. Though equally, we can just buy one a little down the road without, jeopardizing our relationships with some of the very best characters. Seriously, it's not even a question as to whether it's worth it, it's not. Though I do really respect the fact that this decision does exist. And whilst this game doesn't have as many branching storylines as others, I do have to hand it to them. There's a hell of a lot more range here than I think we give them credit for. Hell, for starters, there's just 4 completely different endings which can each last over an hour. That's definitely better than the endings we get in Mass Effect 3, just saying. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video highlighting some of the worst decisions possible, and let me know in the comments whether or not you were aware that all these existed and what other terrible outcomes you've come across. And also let me know if you want more story-based content like this. Huge thanks again to my Patreon supporters, and to anyone else interested in going the extra mile to support the channel, you can donate from as little as £1 a month to get your name in every video, as well as early access to any content that I complete ahead of my self-appointed schedule. Thank you again for watching. I'm Sam Brown. You guys are great. I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you soon in another video.